And now for the professor who has written this report and has seen and observed the changes in partnership with the Gujarat Pollution Control Board from the Chicago University. I'm happy to have Professor Michael Greenstone with us. Thank you very much, Professor Greenstone. Would you like to tell our viewers, we've explained in a nutshell, what exactly is this Surat Gujarat ETS model?
Yeah, the Surat ETS model is one that takes as its starting point that markets can be useful in achieving both environmental and economic goals. And the way it does that is, rather than prescribe to industry, you must do this, or you must install this particular piece of machinery, or you must do that, it asks industry, it gives industry a broad goal, and then says, you figure it out. Find the cheapest way to get this reduction in pollution. And the way it does that is by creating a market in emissions where people are effectively have to pay to pollute. And so that's that. And this kind of style pollution market has been used in many other places around the world and has been very successful.
Now, Professor Greenstone, can it practically be implemented elsewhere or in other industries?
Yeah, so let me explain what happened in Surat. The way it was set up is an actual experiment, like you might test for a new drug or a COVID drug. And 150 industries were placed into this new pollution market. They were randomly chosen. And 150 were continued to be regulated in the standard way by the Gujarat Pollution Control Board. And this was a really innovative step by the Gujarat Pollution Control Board, and they deserve an enormous amount of credit for this. And what happened is, over the next few years, those plants in the emissions market were tracked, and the plants in the status quo were tracked. And the plants in the emissions market reduced their pollution by 20 to 30%. It was really an enormous reduction in pollution, and they kind of achieved it through their own innovation and their own creativity of finding new ways to reduce emissions. And in addition, these plants also reduced the cost of compliance with environmental law went down by maybe about 15%. And so you have what is really kind of like a very sharp counterpoint to the idea that environmental goals have to be in conflict with economic goals. Here you had an experience where these plants, primarily textile plants, were able to both make more money and the people in Surat were able to breathe cleaner air. It was a rare win-win. So coming to your question, based on the experiences in the United States, based on the experiences in Europe, based on the experiences in many other places, and now based on the experiences in Surat, we have very compelling evidence that these markets can work at achieving these dual goals of economic growth and cleaner environment.
It's interesting that you mentioned these international experiments and experiences. Would you like to tell us what the experience has been internationally to make this into a sustainable pollution solution? How much have we drawn from the Indian experiment and vice versa?
Yeah, so in perhaps the most famous example comes from the sulfur dioxide market in the United States that was started in the early 1990s. And there they were trying to solve the problem of acid rain. And people said, oh, it's going to be too expensive to do this. We have no way to do it. And what the U.S. government did was set up a pollution market or for sulfur dioxide where plants were effectively had to pay to pollute. So they faced a price every time they polluted. And you saw a very sharp reduction in the cost of compliance, much sharper than people had predicted, because they hadn't, when you start these markets, the engineers who run these companies, both in Surat and in the United States, are very smart. And they come up with clever ways to reduce pollution that is much less expensive than they had realized before. So that's really a excellent example. And, I think there was a question, certainly our counterparts, our partners at the Gujarat Pollution Control Board wondered, well, can this work in India too? And, now we have very decisive experience, the highest level of evidence that exists in the world with these randomized control trials. I think there's a very compelling case. And, I'll pause, but I just want to point out, I think there's an opportunity for India to implement a national sulfur dioxide cap and trade.
It's an interesting point that you mentioned, because that was about to be my next question. And the Gujarat Pollution Board, you say, has led the way with this initiative, and you've studied the effectiveness of this scheme. How about applying this as a national scheme, particularly in the two main pain points in this country, Delhi and Mumbai? Delhi particularly.
Of course. Yes, I'm in Delhi right now. I think the government set out an NCAP program, I think in 2019, where they had promised or set goals of reducing particulate matter air pollution by maybe 20 or 25% over the course of the next several years. And that has been tough sledding, achieving those goals. I think there's been important progress. But what is left, I think, on the shelf, or what is now on the shelf after the Surat experience, is to use a pollution market to achieve that kind of all at once across the country, rather than building it out city by city. And I think the way to do that would be to set up a sulfur dioxide market, just like the United States did in the 1990s. And you wouldn't have to do it over that many plants or industries. You could do it over largely electricity generators. And we have done some simulations and exercises that suggest that if you were to do that, you could achieve the NCAP goals at quite inexpensively. And that would be a way to both achieve the government's important goals of reducing air pollution while also fostering rapid economic growth. And, one thing that I forgot to mention that from the Surat experience that came out was we were also able to look at, well, what would happen if Gujarat had even tighter controls than they do? And the striking finding, really dramatic finding, was how inexpensive it would be to achieve really substantial reductions in Gujarat if one continued to rely on markets. So I guess the point is, we now have a very sharp tool on the shelf. It's been verified and validated in India, and I think it's just sitting there waiting to be used.
Well, a message perhaps for the policy makers, because they often come under criticism, and rightfully so, for just waiting for the wind speed to pick up and take away the pollution. Well, here is the solution. We can start work on it. Professor Greenstone, many thanks for joining us.